From town bands from days gone by to the big university bands of today. The history of Missouri bands. That's next on City Corner. I'm Steve Potter, and welcome to City Corner. Well, even if you're like me and you couldn't play a musical instrument to save your life, who doesn't love a marching band? Herb Duncan has written this book, The History of Missouri Bands, and he joins us today. Hi, Herb, how are you?
Just fine, thank you.
And I know you love a marching band.
Love all kinds of bands.
You, for years, were the band director at Normandy High School. You were also founder of the Greater St. Louis Marching Band Festival.
Right.
So were you a young band member at one time yourself?
Oh yes, yeah. I started playing the drums in a junior high school band in Ferguson, Missouri.
So I said in the beginning, from town bands of days gone by to the big university bands of today. Is that how what we think of as our university marching bands, do they all sort of, did the seed all start in small towns?
Well, the seed all started back with the military bands. And it evolved into the town bands, and then the town bands actually evolved into the community bands, and then into the educational system.
You know, a town band is not, that's not a term that I hear used today.
No, you don't, no. But before television, before radio, and before phonographs and any other recorded devices, there were the town bands. And every little town across the nation had a town band.
I want to start with an image from your book. Let's take a look at it. This is the Novinger Cornet Band of 1893 from Adair County. It's the very first picture you see in your book.
Right, and the reason I chose this one, Adair County is up around Kirksville, and this particular band, as small as it is, drew at one particular time, I found in a newspaper article, over 2,000 people. And in the article it said, owing to the bad weather, I love that word, owing to the bad weather, only 2,000 people came to hear the band. So you can imagine at the turn of the century what that meant.
Let me read that whole little paragraph that's in your book over this picture. There is no one thing that goes so far toward making any affair a success as a band. Many people in town were not going to go to this year's county fair, owing to the bad weather, as you say. But when they heard that the best band in the state was going to play, they paid 25 cents to hear the music by the Novinger Cornet Band. 3,000 came to listen.
Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah.
Well, of course, they said it was the best band in the state. No one was going to dispute that. In my research, I found that many communities boasted that they had the best band in the state.
And I guess back in those days, you couldn't buy a recording of one of those bands either. It's not like you could really compare them unless you traveled around the state and listened to every one.
No. Later on, there were what they call band tournaments, and communities got together and displayed the community bands, and they gave out loving cups as trophies and so forth.
Your book's fascinating because it really traces the history of Missouri bands from the very beginning in chronological order.
Yes.
And there's a lot of information in here. And you talk a little bit about the bands back in colonial America. What do you know about those?
Well, the colonial American bands were nothing really more than fifes and drums. And they were very functional. And in many cases, they were used for military purposes, of course. But they were also used, the drummers and the fife people who played those later became performers, and it evolved into something more than just a military exercise.
You know, I did a program about a year ago, maybe it was less than that, with people from the Missouri History Museum because they have an exhibit there on the Civil War.
Right.
And part of what we talked about was the early bands that were used during the Civil War in the Army. They were usually very young boys,
Right.
like 12, 13, 14. And it wasn't they weren't just used for music. The music also was sort of like battle directions, and it was kind of complicated.
That's exactly right. Yeah, like a bugler. A bugler, sounds attack and retreat and reveille and everything else. And there were certain drum beats also that inspired the military.
So you say they developed from that sort of function to more of a performance art.
Right, right. The very first band from a school band was at the University of Missouri in Columbia. It was called the agricultural school at that particular time, and the military science department decided they needed a band to accompany the regiment of students enrolled in military science, and that actually became the very first band in the state of Missouri in our educational system.
Well, your book's great. It's got more photographs than you can shake a stick at.
187.
187. I'm sure there's a story there, how you found all those. I'll ask you about that later. But since you mentioned town bands, we have 4 images of different town bands. If we could take a look at those and just, tell me what comes to mind. This first one is the O'Fallon Cornet Band, and this was taken in 1900.
Well, this is the one we're looking at right now is the American Maiden Band.
Okay.
And this was interesting because almost all band people in the bands at this particular, prior to this time, were all men or boys. But this one happened to be all women, and that was somewhat of a breakthrough, and that's why I use this image.
That raised a few eyebrows, did it?
I wasn't there. I don't know, but I'm sure it brought a lot of people out to see women in the band.
Let's look at the next one.
This is the Herman, Missouri Apostolic Band, and the reason I like this one is just on an old carriage and drawn by 2 mules.
And 1882 is the year for this.
Yes, yeah.
And what was the word you used?
Well, I think apostle is on there. It's an apostolic type of band, and I have no information as to why they use that particular word.
And the next image here is from 1880. This is the Boys Drum Band from St. Charles.
I love this one. This was one of my favorite ones. This was a little Catholic church in, where was this?
St. Charles.
In St. Charles, right. And all the boys, and you'll notice they all have their heels together. They're all completely uniformed, how straight they stand, and shows the discipline of that school. But it's just a little boys band of all drummers.
On their best behavior there, I guess.
And I'm sure they are.
Well, we talked a little bit about bands in colonial America. How did bands develop after that? I know part of your book deals with around pre-World War I and after World War I. What was the scene at that time?
Well, pre-World War I, there were not very many bands, but during World War I, when the Americans went over to, especially into France, General Pershing found that the French had very, very good bands, and he developed a whole school to teach our boys how to play like the French. And he even employed musicians from the French National School in Paris to instruct our military men on how to properly play in a military band. From there, it developed. Those men came back to the United States and brought that information and that training back, and started to bring into our culture the influence of the Europeans.
Were bands bands are a luxury, sort of, I think. Tell me if my thinking is right. Did the economy and like times of war, did that affect the health of bands? Because you got to have time, you got to have money for instruments. I would think during some periods of our history maybe that bands didn't thrive as well as they did at other times. Well,
it's interesting that bands thrived very much after each war, after World War I and after World War II. And the patriotism was a big factor. the George M. Cohan type of music and things similar to that.
George M., great musical.
Right. But the economics of it were, the important thing was that Sears and Roebuck, the great catalog company, you could buy an instrument, a music stand, and an instruction book, you know, for a pretty good, it wasn't that expensive. Back then, maybe $20 or $25 would get you an instrument, and so you could have a flute or a trumpet or a trombone for $40. And
you also address bands during an iconic time in our history here in St. Louis, the St. Louis World's Fair of 1904.
Well, in 1904, the greatest number of international bands gathered in St. Louis, and the 1904 fair started off with a band, the famous John Philip Sousa band. And Sousa brought his band, and it was the highest paid band that was brought to St. Louis for that international exposition. And the opening concert had 3,000 singers on the Grand Basin, accompanied by the John Philip Sousa band. Then Sousa played nightly, except on Monday nights, concerts in the park. At the World's Fair, there were 3 concerts a day by 3 different bands. So you could go any place in the park at the World's Fair and hear a band concert.
Wow. I had a grandmother who was born in 1891. I remember her talking with her older sisters. I remember listening to the stories of when they used to go, because people would go to the World's Fair. They didn't just go once. They'd go 20 times.
Right,
during the year it was here.
Well, there's another very interesting thing about the World's Fair. The giant Ferris wheel that we had here came down from the Chicago Exposition prior to it.
It's 1890 something, wasn't it?
Yes, right. And it came down on rail cars and was reassembled here in St. Louis. 85 people could get in each car. I mean, that was how big it was. And it was, of course, almost the centerpiece of the fair. But there was a band that was assigned to get in one of these cars and play on the Ferris wheel. It was the Ferris wheel band. How many times those musicians had to go round and round and round is not recorded.
And there's a rumor, I don't know if it's true, but they say that Ferris wheel, when they took it down, they buried it in Forest Park. Can you confirm that?
I cannot confirm it, and no one else can either.
Okay. It's
but
a good
no,
story.
the giant axle in the middle was reported to be buried somewhere in Forest Park.
Who knows, maybe there's a clarinet out there too.
Oh,
Who knows?
probably.
We need to take a break. We're talking with Herb Duncan about the history of Missouri bands. We'll be back right after this.
Experience St. Louis.
The odds of this daughter of a clergyman spending 11 weeks at #1 on the U.S. singles charts? 1 in 19 million. The odds of going on to win 6 Grammy Awards? 1 in 1.4 million. The odds of having a child diagnosed with autism? 1 in 110. I'm Toni Braxton, and I encourage you to learn the signs of autism at autismspeaks.org.
You realize that 49 million Americans struggle with hunger? That's 1 out of every 6 Americans.
These people are around us every day. They're our friends, they're our coworkers, their kids go to school with our kids.
Sometimes we're not even aware that they're struggling. This problem is closer than you think. But so is the solution.
Play a role in ending hunger. Visit feedingamerica.org/hunger and find your local food bank.
So, you're looking for help with your mortgage. Worried about foreclosure?
We can help you keep your house. All we ask for in return is that you submit to our plans for galactic domination. Sign.
If you're facing foreclosure, talk to the right people. Speak with HUD-approved housing counselors free of charge at 888-995-HOPE.
I'm Steve Potter. Welcome back to City Corner. We're talking to Herb Duncan today about his book, The History of Missouri Bands, 1800 to 2000. And Herb, you were a long time, just like a little biography of you. I know for a long time you were the band director at Normandy High School, and you went on to found the Greater St. Louis Marching Band Festival.
Right.
Right. So what's your history?
Well, I've been a band director and in music education and fine arts all my life. And I also started the band program at the young Missouri University in St. Louis when it was way back when it was called the Normandy Residence Center. And there was a gentleman there who was in charge. He was the administrator. And his name was Ed Potter. And he happened to be your grandfather.
That's right.
And he was the first man that hired me to come to St. Louis. And so he was a great mentor and a wonderful principal. And
a pretty good judge of character, I guess.
Well, as far as I was concerned, he was one of the finest persons that I have ever met. And just because he's your grandfather, I have to give credit to him for your existence.
I'll give him that credit too.
Right.
He deserves it.
But I've been involved and continue to be involved. I'm the band coordinator for the 4th of July parade, the VP parade, and I get all the bands for that, and the Thanksgiving parade here in St. Louis, and so.
And you have a love for bands.
I do. I do.
All right, back to your book. Let's look at, you have a chapter called Pioneers, and there's a gentleman by the name of Charles Emmons. We have a picture of him from your book. Who was he?
Oh, Professor Charles Emmons was director of bands at the University of Missouri Columbia, pardon me. And Charles Emmons came from Texas. He had a good, excellent high school band, and he was brought into Missouri to be the director of bands at Columbia. And many people who went through the university system will remember Charles Emmons because he was the one that invented on the marching band field the Mizzou Tigers, M-I-Z-Z-O-U, and it changed to Tigers.
As they're marching, yeah.
As they're marching. And he developed that just on a whim at one time, and it is stuck. It's still there, and every band director since has done that. One time, one of the band directors decided not to do it, and he heard from every alumni saying, where are our Mizzou Tigers?
So they're still doing that today?
They do it every Saturday that they have a football game in Columbia.
Wow. This next picture was taken in 1926. This is a band from Springfield, Missouri. This was actually taken at Union Station here in St. Louis.
Yes, this one was. This was on an old Frisco steam engine, and this is the world's largest Boy Scout band. And it was started by a gentleman who was the director of bands at Springfield Central High School. It was just called Springfield High School then. It's now called Springfield Central, named Jimmy Robertson. And Mr. Robertson was the organizer of this band that just grew and grew and grew, and at one time had over 400 people in it.
Wow. Is there anything can a band be too big, Herb?
He didn't think so. I don't know. But today there are I just went online and found a Texas band that had 600 students in the high school band.
But explain something to me then, because you've been a band director, you should know. I can't imagine choreographing that many people. How do you get 600 people to play music when they're supposed to and to move their feet when they're supposed to? That's quite an undertaking.
How do you get that to happen? It's very difficult. But with a band like that, and I wondered that same thing, and so when I went online to look at it, this was a band out of Texas. And they put about 100 on the field, and they put everybody else around the field, so you can't get
What's the biggest band you ever had in Normandy?
about 180.
But that's a good-sized band in
Yeah,
itself,
that
isn't
was,
it?
yeah. Well, one of the biggest problems is the cost of transportation and uniforms and everything else.
You know, I don't know how long ago, I'm thinking around 2005, I could be off. You were on the show as part of your work with the Greater St. Louis Marching Band Festival.
Yes.
We looked at some film and stuff of marching bands. So it's quite a production these days.
Oh, yes. Yeah, it actually has changed over the years, in the last 12, 15 years, to become a spectacular show rather than just marching up and down and playing a Sousa march. Band directors today have a theme and try to tell a story, both in dance and in music on the field. And you'll find this at the college and university level and at the high school level.
But with dealing with all those people too, there must be more than a band director. You must have people in charge of this, that, and the other, right?
Exactly. You have assistants, you have people who are choreographers, you have people who are show designers and things like that. It's developed into quite an art form.
These next 4 pictures from your book, History of Missouri Bands, are college and university bands. And the first one we want to look at, it was taken in 1943, and this is Joplin Junior College.
Well, this is interesting because there is no Joplin Junior College anymore. It's
right?
now Missouri Southern
Oh,
University, and this is just this is how things start. Just a few young people in the band, and the program, evolves out of this.
So it can go from that to 400, as you were saying.
Yes, right.
Right. This next picture is the SMSU Pride.
Well, see, that's a good comparison because in Springfield, Missouri, right now, Missouri State University holds one of the records of one of the largest university bands. They've been in the Rose Bowl several times, Macy's Parade, and everything else. But as you can see by the picture, there are quite a number of people there. But once again, that's run by 2 directors and 2 assistants only. They get all of that work done, and it's an amazing organization.
And this is more recent. That photograph was taken in 1997.
Yeah, this is a recent photograph.
The next photograph, we go back to 1966. This is Central Missouri State College, and is this right? This is 40 high school bands?
Yes, 40 high school bands in Warrensburg, Missouri, which is now called the University of Central Missouri. It has changed names from Warrensburg State Teachers College, but this is what bands used to do. We don't do this much anymore. Form an outline, and these are all high school bands on band day forming USA, and I'm sure we're playing America the Beautiful.
Something like that. And now to Washington University here in St. Louis. This is their wind ensemble from 1978.
Right. This is Dan Pressgrave's wind ensemble at Washington University at St. Louis, and Washington University has really never had a marching band, but have always had an outstanding wind ensemble, which is really a more modern term for the band. Bands were used, but more recently, when you sit down and play the concert music, it's known as a wind ensemble.
Okay. In a moment, we're going to take a look at some high school bands, and I chose some from your book. You've got them from all over the state, but I chose a bunch from right here in the area.
All right.
Before we do that, though, when you were working on this book, didn't you write to like every county in the state looking for photographs? That must have been quite an undertaking.
I did. I wrote to every historical society in which there's one in every county and many times in a city or small town. Unfortunately, historical societies today are manned, or fortunately, they're manned by people who are retirees and everything else. They're not very familiar with emails. They're not very familiar with modern technology, and even the copy machine is a challenge to many of them. So oftentimes, I just took it upon myself to go and find these.
No kidding.
And yeah, I traveled all over the state and went into town halls and into basements and and found these in various places.
Well, we have 5 images from your book. Let's look at right now. These are high school bands, and I chose ones from the St. Louis area that people might be able to relate
Sure.
to. The first is from 1908, and this is McKinley High School.
All right, McKinley High School was the first high school band in Missouri. And the first high school in Missouri was actually called Central High School. In fact, many schools, when they first had a school, called it Central High School, no matter whether it was Central High School in St. Joe or in Springfield or Kansas City. And in St. Louis, it was the same. But McKinley High School was the first high school band in Missouri.
Next, we go to 1922, Central.
Yeah, now there's the Central High School band.
Let's go to the next one, Webster Groves, 1924.
Right, this is the first high school band in Webster Groves, and it represents the suburban area, you know, and what it was. Today, it's a much larger band.
We talked about Normandy High School earlier, my grandfather, and then you worked there. Well, this is before either one of you were there, Normandy, 1926.
And that's it. All I know is what I found on the picture. I know very little information about it.
And the last one we have as far as high schools in the St. Louis area, Ferguson, 1935.
Right, and Ferguson High School.
And you were there.
Yes,
Yeah.
not that one. I graduated from the old Ferguson High School, but Ferguson Central High School was the first high school in St. Louis County.
You've got some interesting examples in your book, Herb. Let's look at them now of some old street music. I think these were at a street music collection out of
Right.
Kansas City.
Yeah, in Kansas City, there's a wonderful, Kansas City was a great publishing center for music of all kinds, mostly piano scores. And these actually are piano scores for music that was basically then transcribed for bands. And it's a wonderful collection. It's actually in the University of Missouri, Kansas City library now.
Well, Herb, your book is great. History of Missouri Bands, 1800 to 2000. If you were ever in a band, or your kid was in a band, or you just love the band music, it's a great book, 180-something photographs.
Right.
Chronological order, how they formed, what happened to them, and the history is fascinating. Available, I know, at the Missouri History Museum.
Right.
And online.
Online, just at Missouri, historyofmissouribands.com.
Well, Herb Duncan, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to see you again.
And thank you.
I'm Steve Potter. That's all the time we have for this edition of City Corner. We'll see you next time. Bye.